Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go over some tips that you can do to have better creature mouths. This is an area that I find very interesting, mainly because the possibilities with the creature's teeth are pretty much endless. And it doesn't matter if you're drawing something aquatic or if you're drawing something that lives on the ground. The point of this is we're making up a creature's mouth, and we want to know where to place the teeth and how to actually open the mouth correctly. I'm going to go over some common mistakes also, and these mistakes are things that I have done for years that took me a while to figure out, and also it took some other artists to point out these flaws. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm opening up a creature's mouth, and if you're drawing along with me, make sure to keep your sketches light so that you can clearly see what shapes that you're putting in. You don't want to commit to any details yet. This is more of rough sketching and just to get the placement and proportions of things. All right, you'll see the shape that I'm drawing here. It's almost like a heart, but the top portion is just a little bit more squeezed, and then the bottom portion is opened a little bit more. All right, so what this is the top jaw and the bottom jaw. And we're going to draw teeth on the whole thing. Now, let's put a center line in here. The way I'm doing this is the center line is going to go to the throat opening, and then the center line for the top portion of the jaw is going to do the same thing. So they're going to meet right around here. And if you want to go as far as putting a little sphere in there to indicate where the back of the throat would be, then try that. Now notice how the sphere is pushed over to the right. It's closer to the corner right here. This, and you can put it in right now, this is eventually where the membrane is going to be. Okay, the stretchy skin that helps connect the top and bottom jaw. This creature we're just going to make up, and it's also a generic version of an opened mouth. So fantasy, horror, insect, even marine life. This can all apply to that. All right, so let's figure out where the molars would be. So let's just indicate a couple molars, just put some little spheres on there and then stop. Notice how I am placing these spheres semi-crooked and they're pointing upwards like this. A common mistake that I see beginner artists do is when they open the mouth to a creature, let's say that it's open from front. Okay, so let's say there's sharp teeth right here, like this. And then we go to the bottom jaw. Guess what? The teeth are pointing directly upward. That's not how mouths open. What happens is there's a hinge. Okay, we have a hinge in our jaw. So in reality, you would have a mouth like this. And there's the mouth opening. Guess what? You would see the top of the teeth. There's the molar. You wouldn't see the sharp teeth nearly as much on the bottom as you would on the top. And it would be curved like this. And then you would have, like the tongue coming down like that. And that's because the mouth over here, it opens at an arc. One of the things to really pay attention to when you're doing creature mouths is whatever teeth that you put on the bottom here. So let's say there's a big sharp tooth right there, and I'm going to put that same tooth on the opposite side. You need to figure out, okay, where is this going to shut on the top portion of the jaw? So what I like to do is I like to very lightly sketch in an arc, and it looks like this sharp tooth is going to need a space to sit right around here. So that means I can draw a tooth on the opposite side of it and then maybe have a sharp tooth in front of it. So what will happen is if you have this mouth, this sharp tooth is here, this bottom tooth is right behind it because it closed in between these that I drew. Okay, so these, as in these two teeth, are right there, and then the bottom tooth, because if I close the mouth, that's the way it's going to shut. Now, I will say this though. I've been carried away with drawing very evil creatures sometimes to the point where the mouth just looks like this. Just jagged teeth everywhere. Okay, it is so much fun to draw these types of mouths. Guess what, folks? You don't have to measure out these because you can leave this open for interpretation. But when it comes to a more solidified design and something that we see more of in nature, like with reptiles and even herbivores, and look at carnivores, look at all the different types of animals, and you will see the, like the chewing teeth and then the canines, for dogs. Just make sure that if you're making these teeth up, that you give them a space on the top. So let's keep going with this. What if next to it is a shorter sharp tooth followed by one that's even smaller? So now you have 1, 2, 3, and then there's a slight gap right there. Okay, so how are you going to accommodate that gap and these teeth on the top? Okay, well, guess what? This gap, see that tooth right there? That is for that gap. That's where that tooth is going to sit. And then these two, if you do that arc going up, guys, if you're learning this for the first time and you keep drawing these arcs, you're going to see a lot of this. It's going to look like a bunch of different sketch lines going up to the top jaw. That's fine. I would rather you do this and learn the measurements so that way you can better make a realistic jaw later on. Okay, because what will happen is, see these two teeth right here? Let's go up to the top and then let's put those teeth in. And that's what it's going to look like. Okay, so you have that big one. This gap may be a little bigger than what I drew down here, but the same thing. Like you can tell where these teeth are going to be. And then let's say that inside the mouth right here, there's going to be smaller ones for the front. Well, let's make sure we honor that. Here's another thing, though, that beginner artists tend to forget about, and that is where the edge of the lip is and where the gums are. There is a long-standing argument, let's just mention dinosaurs for a second, of whether or not dinosaurs had lips or not. Okay, we see it a lot in sketches with T-Rexes and Allosaurs. And so what I like to do, if I can imagine where the teeth are coming out of the gums, I will lightly sketch in the gum line, just like this. Now that center line that I drew coming down the middle of the bottom jaw, or if you make sure that if you draw that line for the gum, it arcs right over top that center line, like this. So there's the opening, goes down, and then the arc right about there. Okay, now I can draw the thickness for the lip area. So now we're starting to separate it. A common mistake that I had for years, and I think that those of you listening right now can probably resonate with this, is that I would just put everything together. So I would ignore the gum line. I would ignore the teeth coming out of specific places in the gum, and then I would ignore the space in between the gum and the lip. I'll admit, I just didn't care. I was like, it's a creature. I'm making this up. It's not from Earth. True. However, and this is me coming from a concept artist background. So those of you that want to get into video games and concept art for visual effects and movies and such, somebody has to model your creature. So if you're not clear about the idea and the design intent, they're not going to have anything to model correctly. And the last thing that you want to do is have the modeler make up or design the rest of your creature. You don't want to do that because it just means that you didn't do your job correctly. All right. And I know it's kind of harsh, but it happens a lot. And there are some creative interpretations that 3D artists will have to finish off the designs. And that's great. If you guys are working well together and you get to an ambiguous area that you don't really know what to do about it, then sometimes seeing 3D sculpts can help, sketch out the rest of it. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting in the tops of these molars in the back. All right, I'm going to do the same over here. I'm just putting in little ovals to show the tops of them, and then little grooves in between the ovals, just to show like, hey, this is where the grinding action happens within those teeth. Now, another thing to watch out for is the actual gum and the jaw bones coming together. So I like to put a little hill right there. A little hill right there. Okay, so this little hill area right in here, this is not common with nature. It's more of just a thing that I like to do personally with my creature designs to show the jawbone and how the gums will, grow near the teeth. I can put in a cool little tongue if I wanted. It's in the middle here, and then it's coming up from the throat. So this is why I drew that sphere, everybody. Remember that original sphere that I drew? Well, this is the opening. It's the throat opening. Because up here is the front palate. And then I just want to show clear design intent. So notice how I'm giving some space for our eyes to follow. Okay, we have this tongue, we have the space in between, and then we have the teeth growing out of the gums. Okay, and then over here, the stretched membrane, and then we can work from that. Now, let's start putting in the top teeth here, because right here we have, and we can add to this that we drew up here. Okay, if this big tooth will come right in here, and then these two front ones will close immediately right here. Maybe we can fit a thin one in the middle. Okay, so if that's the case, we'll just put one in the middle like this, and that way these two can close around that one. Now, when you are watching this, because you're watching this on YouTube right now, you're probably going, I am so confused. I have no idea what the heck I'm drawing or where these go. Please know that if you compartmentalize each space for the tooth and just account for it as it closes with these arc sketches or these arc lines, you're going to start to get an idea of where each one will close. Okay, and then after this one, it will close in front of it. Then you can start putting in the smaller ones. Now, remember that shape that we drew here? This is why it's important, because guess what? Our teeth are going to follow that shape. These are so small. I am not going to sit here and worry about each groove opening down here accommodating these teeth from above. No. This is a creature, I'm making it up, and you as the viewer are just going to have to be satisfied, and I'm just going to have to be satisfied with believing that the bottom set of teeth can close on this top set for each individual small one. Nobody is going to give you an F for failure or anything like that. Okay, next, let's think about the perspective though. This is another common mistake when it comes to drawing mouths, especially with sharp teeth and everything. The perspective is way off. Over here, off of the page, there's going to be an imaginary vanishing point. Now, the reason it's not on the page is because all of the construction lines are going to go to that point, and the whole thing is going to be in forced perspective. The last thing you want to do is force the perspective by putting a vanishing point directly on the page that you're sketching. Let me explain that. So I'm going to give a little cube lesson 101 down here. When we as humans view squared or blocked objects in real life in front of us, look at your desks real quick. Look at all of the shapes that have a block-like shape. The vanishing points for those edges for your cube are not in your line of sight. Okay, that's not how we view real-world objects, because the vanishing points are off into our peripherals. Peripheral vision as in on the sides of our eyes. That's where our vision is going. Walk down the street and look at houses. Look at big buildings. The vanishing points in perspective to those buildings are way off. Not off as in incorrect, but they're way off into the distance. Okay, so when I draw these cubes, notice how the edges are not converging severely. Bear with me here, folks, because this lesson is going to apply to this creature mouth. So when you draw this cube, it doesn't look like this. This is what happens when you force perspective. This is why everybody tries to draw the common gridded city in their portfolios, and it just looks horrible. And you don't want to do that. You see how I force the perspective so these vanishing points are right on the page, like literally right there, and then maybe right there. And everything is forced. We don't view the real world like that. So if you want your mouth for your creature to be accurate, make sure that when you draw these perspective lines going into the distance, that they are converging. However, they're not converging on the actual document that you're sketching with. There you go. See how these are getting closer into the distance way over here on the left, but it's not on the page. That might have been a long-winded explanation, but I've had to do that so much throughout the years, so I know that some of my explanations, they tend to be a little wordy, but I think that they're helping. So comment below if it is helping and that you're sketching along with me and you're figuring out what the heck's going on with the perspective issues for your creatures. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm doing is I'm putting in these spheres tilted for these molars, or ellipses. Putting in the ellipses, okay, and then I'm going to do the same over on this side, and guess what? I'm going to do my perspective lines, so it gives me a ballpark estimate of where I need to put those. Now, something to pay attention to, everybody. Remember that very first shape that I did, that top of the heart shape before any of the teeth were in? That is going to be the indicator of where your gum line is. So make sure that any teeth that you place are going to grow out of that. Because what happens is, if you look up here, this is the palate to the inside of the creature. This incisor, I guess you can call it an incisor. Let's distinguish that a little bit more. So now we know where the gum line is, and we can draw a little bit on the outside of where the lip is. Okay, now that heart shape that I drew, let's talk about what we were just mentioning. The heart shape is going to be an indicator of where the gum line is. Okay, and in here, guess what, everybody? You have your own creative freedom to stretch whatever skin that you want in here. Put some creature organs in there. Put some cool shapes that do not exist in nature. I want to help you using reference, but at the same time, you have to realize that you don't have to copy animals exactly in order to get these creatures. Using reference is a skill in itself. And if you have trouble using reference, it could be that you're just not searching for the correct thing. And also, you're relying too much on reference. It's because you're not trying to create the rest of the creature. It's okay to put random shapes in. That's why I spend so much time on this channel scribbling, because we just allow these shapes to happen where they may. But for a mouth like this, you definitely want to at least make these believable. Remember, a 3D artist will be taking your sketch and they'll be making it into something that lives and breathes. All right, so once we get this, you can start seeing the mouth really come together now. And let's say that you're drawing a creature mouth that is so insane looking that it doesn't really shut like a normal mouth. That's okay. You sketch out the pivot joint, okay? Like for here, the joint of where the jawbone would be. You sketch it out for the creature you're making up. And then you figure out by the arc lines of how you want that mouth to close. All right, remember, same thing applies to the front view also, down here. Okay, now it's not going to be a heart shape, but draw a sphere for the opening of the throat. You're going to draw the line work for the bottom jaw, and then you're going to draw the top like this for the top part. So there's the palate inside. Okay, you maybe have, let's do a crazy looking tongue. Maybe it's like a snake, but then you have a bunch of other stuff happening, like some crazy stuff. Maybe the teeth come out like this. Okay, and then maybe you have these huge fangs coming out here. You see how I'm just making this up as I go, and then you're probably wondering, well, how the heck is that going to close? Well, let's figure it out. We have this gap in between the two huge fangs. So if we go straight down, that jaw is going to have to shut right there. All right, so maybe we can put like a large tooth in the middle. Let's leave some space for these teeth to shut. Okay, and then maybe we can draw some smaller teeth on the side. Okay, maybe a little dip in the gum line to accommodate these things falling down. This is why it's always good to draw side views and front views of the same mouth. It helps a lot. All right, so let's jump up here, and now you can start to see the realism happening. So this mouth, this whole head, that's a whole other lesson. So I'm not going in depth about the head of this creature. And then of course the bottom jaw. So it's like a really big beast, and that's what it is. But guess what? The mouth looks pretty realistic, or at least the designed intent is there. I'm going to put in the darkness of the throat and the back. And I want you guys just to have fun with making a lot of your creature up too. I want you to have fun making these creatures up, because you can use a lot of reference from real world. You can use herbivores, carnivores, you can use lizards and alligators, and even leatherback sea turtles on the inside with all those crazy rigid teeth. And look at movies, just look at the Predator, look at the Xenomorph, look at those mouths. It's very human-like. If you use those as reference and just try to bend the rules a little bit, you know, nobody's going to give you an F. You're not going to fail. And if you do fail, it's okay. So the thing about drawing is that you want to keep things loose and you want to think freely. Now, a lot of these different measurements that I have with the teeth and the gums, the lips, upper part of the mouth, lower part of the mouth, perspective, please don't think that you need to get this in one go. Instead, have fun with the actual process of drawing, not about the outcome that you think it needs to get to in order to be successful. This is what's going to make or break you as an artist. We all have that perfectionist in us. I totally get it, and it hits us and it creeps up on us all the time. But if you take a step back and start to figure things out with the pencil without thinking, hey, I need to make this perfect, then you're going to enjoy the actual process of drawing, because drawing itself is not supposed to be stressful. But what stresses people out is perfection. Doing a ton of these different types of sketches with anatomy and figuring out all of the nooks and crannies about what you're drawing, this is what's going to help you later draw on the fly, make up things without looking at reference. That's ultimately the goal, right? All right, so comment below. Let me know what you're working on. Let me know your struggles as an artist. And I do appreciate everybody's comments. I read them all. I want to give a little disclaimer though. The last video I posted about the top 7 mistakes that beginner creature designers make, I've had quite a few people saying, well, you drew that lizard wrong. I'm like, it's a lizard-like creature. It's not a lizard. I'm aware of the lizard anatomy, and I'm also aware that a lot of times large eyeballs do happen in nature, especially with alligators and crocodiles and certain lizards and birds and everything. But the majority of beginner creature design, the eyes are way too big based on the head that you're drawing. Mouths, this is another more in-depth problem that I see with creature design. So hopefully you can start to couple these together and you can create something that you're truly proud of. Join our Discord, check out the links in the description below, and post those sketches, no matter how cruddy, dirty, or gritty you think they are and how much of a quote-unquote failure you think they are, because we don't judge anybody based on our work. Thanks everybody for tuning into this. I hope you had a lot of fun. I know I did. Creature heads are so much fun, and also the mouths. All right, until next time, peace.